little appreciation by leading Leave campaigners, but also by the government, of the simple fact that international cooperation does involve a balance of rights and obligations. And it does include participation in political, administrative, judicial structures that constrain and condition your national autonomy. And the UK government is going to discover that even the British aren't exempt from the two fundamental axioms that we talk about in the field of international trade relations. First of all, the ambition of an international trade agreement is conditioned primarily by the willingness of the parties to agree appropriate institutional arrangements. Institutional arrangements are key to the type of international trade agreement that you get, because you have to create mutual trust between your respective institutions so as to make the system function. The more ambitious the deal, the more extensive the obligations, the more the institutional structures required to make those obligations work in practice, and the less your national autonomy actually means very much in practice. Second axiomatic principle, in international trade, size matters. Bigger players set the rules. It's so obvious, isn't it? It's so obvious, and yet we've pretended that it doesn't happen like that. They set the rules at the global level. The big international organisations that dictate the development of the world economy are dominated, like it or not, by America, Europe, and increasingly China. And they set the rules at the bilateral level. Big markets determine the terms of access of smaller markets, and if the smaller markets don't like it, they don't get the access that they wanted. Size matters in international trade. Now, unfortunately, this lack of understanding isn't limited to the likes of Nigel Farage or Gisela Stewart. It's been actively promoted, actively encouraged by the likes of Boris Johnson, Liam Fox, and now also by Theresa May. The Prime Minister keeps saying that she wants the UK to be one of the great champions, the global champions of free trade. We're going to strike ambitious trade deals, not just with the EU, but with the rest of the world as well. Yet at the same time, we are going to retain our full national sovereignty. We will not subject ourselves to external constraints or institutions. These two things are simply incompatible with each other. Trade deals always mean accepting restrictions, often very extensive restrictions on your sovereignty. They always entail a degree of external control and influence, especially where there is unequal bargaining power. They always have profound impacts upon your domestic law, and they inevitably involve subjugation to some form of external, arbitral or judicial authority. Being a champion of free trade and having full national sovereignty is simply an oxymoron. Now, a few people as they come in sort of said to me, I hope you're going to end on an optimistic note and on a positive well, I'll do my best. I've hastily scribbled some positive things for us all to reflect upon, but they're positive more in a determined way than a sort of wildly happy, good, sort of a swivel-eyed way. We'll leave that to you, Kevin. As a starting proposition, the starting proposition is quite important, and we should never either forgive or forget it. Because we should neither forgive nor forget how a bunch of charlatans and demagogues set out to con, trick and frighten as many millions of people as they possibly could into subjecting themselves to what was essentially an ideological fixation. And that is always the starting point that I'm going to carry on the rest of my career, the rest of my life as its basis. But at the same time, there is no point at all being consumed by resentment, being taken over by anger, or shrugging your shoulders and thinking, oh well, okay, sarah, sarah. There's actually quite a lot of work to be done, and I think this is the positive bit. There's a lot of work that needs to be done now, and I'll just highlight three main challenges. First challenge is to hold the Leave campaigners to account. Hold them to account for the promises that they made, hold them to account for the things that they denied would ever happen, hold them to account for the problems they said would never materialise. These people made a lot of promises and they denied a lot of things, and we need to make sure that they take responsibility for that. Secondly, in particular, we need to make sure that they take responsibility and they don't shove it onto the shoulders of everybody else. Either people like me, or many of the people I suppose in this room, anyone who dares to express a contrary opinion and is immediately shouted down as undemocratic, anti-patriotic, a traitor, an enemy of the people. Or, just as importantly, onto the shoulders of the EU. It made my blood boil to hear Theresa May try to justify her vanity election by blaming it all on the interference of foreigners. That was cynical and disgusting. But that's exactly a challenge that we must fight back against. Responsibility for what happens belongs with the people who made this mess and them alone. And the third challenge is to be vigilant against a whole set of other problems which are going to come our way very quickly, because there is a depressing correlation between many of the leading Leave campaigners and a whole series of other anti-rational movements such as climate change denial and regressive socio-economic preferences, for example by seeing workers' rights as nothing more than some sort of red tape that needs to be swept away, by treating equality rights as PC gone mad, that we must free ourselves so we can be bigoted as we like, because that's what we already want to be. These people have other agendas, and leaving the EU is going to be a massive step in their favour to realise these other agendas. Now, in terms of tackling these challenges, I think I probably have two main pieces of advice. And the first one is never to say, never to utter the words, "I feel ashamed to be British." For the very simple reason, it somehow suggests that these people have a monopoly on what it means to be British, and they represent what this country is about. They don't. They had a narrow majority in a referendum. They do not represent what this country is all about. And secondly, and that comment actually brings me on to my second main point, we should distinguish very carefully between the leading Leave campaigners and, it has to be said, their compact sort of zombie army of swivel-eyed loons who do get on the internet on a regular basis to screech their abuse at anyone who dares to express a contrary opinion, and the vast majority of people in this country who happen to vote Leave. They are as much the victims of this contract as anybody else is. They are decent, good people who want the best for their country, want the best for their society and for their families. They were conned, tricked and frightened into supporting a political ideology, and they are as much the victims as any of the rest of us. And so ultimately, for those who do believe that the values and interests of the UK and the EU are aligned, that we share much more in common than we have as differences, and that we will have to work patiently to win public support for the UK rejoining its rightful place at the heart of the European Union, I think the task is that we just have to work hard and work patiently. It might be 2 years, it might be 20, it might be 5 years, it might be 50, but the job is to get back into the EU. And I think that's the job that needs to be done. It's not about optimism, it's really about determination. I've probably spoken for too long, but the optimistic bit had to be added in. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to